I am very happy to introduce the best-selling author and Harvard psychologist, Dr. Jeff Brown. Dr. Brown is the author of two popular books for the Chicken Soup for the Soul series, Say Goodbye to Stress and Think Positive. It says Thank Positive. It's probably Think Positive.
That was Joe Strand's influence, being thankful.
So, yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. You're also a frequent media guest, and I hear you're entertaining, witty, and inspirational. And you're along with Liz Neprin, who is a fitness guru who I've known for years. So please help me welcome Dr. Jeffrey Brown and Liz Neprin.
Great. Do you want to be on the left or the right? Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks so much for being here. I've been looking forward to this. Marie Pazinski, you're going to get to hear from her, right, later today? Yeah, good. So, gosh, now I'm stressed because Marie's here. She is fantastic. You can look forward to being able to hear from her a little bit later today as well. But it's a real treat to be with you today and to speak about Say Goodbye to Stress. Stress is something we all face in our lives, whether we like it or not. So it's good to be with you, be able to talk about different strategies and techniques for managing stress in our lives. We're going to do a little bit different format for you today. Liz Neprin is a good friend, colleague, writer friend, all kinds of connections that I have with Liz. And we wanted to mix it up a little bit today and do sort of like a question and answer sort of format here with us. And then at the very end of that, we want to include you in the process too if you have questions about stress. One of the features that is so nice about the Say Goodbye to Stress book and the Think Positive for Great Health book is that they are a part of, and Marie's book as well, Boost Your Brain Power, is part of the Chicken Soup for the Soul and Harvard Medical School collaboration, which is really nice. We might talk a little bit about actually what it's like to have a Chicken Soup for the Soul book in front of you. It's kind of an interesting, fun process to see happen as well. So I'll kind of quit talking now, and we'll chat with Liz, and Liz will chat with me, and then we want to hear from you as well. So thank you so much for being here. What a great opportunity to be able to learn. This expo is phenomenal. I've seen bits and pieces already and look forward, even as a male, going through and seeing all the great things for women. It's a wonderful way of learning and being educated about life and how to improve it.
So today we're going to talk about stress, and I think that's something I know a little bit about. And I know when I am stressed, I usually call you. So whenever we are done here, I will be giving you all his number. So if you have stress, you can call him. Okay, let's talk about some numbers. Last week, as a matter of fact, there was a Gallup poll about stress, about the whole nation. And it found that New York State was about 30th overall for stress, which actually wasn't too bad. However, New York State was in the top 5 for the lowest levels of life satisfaction, which is an element of stress. So that's not very good. The fact that New Yorkers, not just New York City, but all of New York, is not very satisfied with life. The things that people are stressed about are money. 76% of people stress about money. 70% stress about work, 65% stress about the economy, 49% stress about their job, and then the list goes on, as you know. Parents don't think kids are stressed, but in fact they are. Mm-hmm. Yes, about 69%, nearly 3/4 of parents say that stress has no impact on their kids, and yet 91% of children report feeling some stress. That's interesting. Women are more likely to be stressed than men. Almost half of women say that they have stress, and it has increased in the past 5 years. And believe it or not, what generation would you say is the most stressed of all, if you had to guess?
Gosh, I would think that it probably would be, I would say parents or grandparents.
Gen Xers, actually. And I don't know, are they just becoming parents?
Probably.
Okay, and yeah. I think that's probably because of the job market. Mm-hmm. So I thought that would be a really good place to start, is just to talk about millennials and Gen Xers as we enter the 21st century. So I guess my first question is, what are we so stressed about? What is the main source of stress now that we have flipped to a new century?
Well, it's interesting, as she's mentioning the Gen X piece, and Gen Xers facing a lot of stress. I think stress in general for us in our lives, the shape and way that stress comes to us, the form of it, is very different. Historically, if you think about it, stress was a lot about survival, making sure that you were well fed, that you had a roof over your head, those things. We still have to see about those things, but I think the opportunities that come our direction, the many different things that are pressing on us, those things that make us feel like our shoulders really do have burdens on them, and it's part of the world we live in, I think that is a different face of stress that we're facing today. And we have to realize that. We have to accept the fact that, I always think about how technology is so wonderful, isn't it? We can have computers do so many things for us, but financially, we sort of get a raise, in cost of living, but we've never had a kind of a raise in cost of technology in our lives, and we're always having to accommodate for that. And I don't know about you, my phone is old by current standards, but those are just constant expectations and constant stressors that are coming. So I could see how Gen Xers, who perhaps haven't really had much of a different lifestyle, to even have technology in that would be one thing that would be a factor that they're facing. But certainly, the things that we used to face has changed. We don't have to worry so much about those basics and necessities, say, during the Great Depression, where people were just not employed. They were concerned about their next meal. We do still have to protect our jobs, and we have to be mindful of how we eat and take care of ourselves, but then all of the other demands and opportunities and sports schedules that are going on with our kids and things that are going on at school and opportunities. I call it the illusion of missed opportunity, that we have this pressure on us, that we believe that if we don't do everything, we're really going to miss the one thing that we'll regret that we didn't do. And that itself is stressful. And there's some kind of a bit of distortion in thinking. My background, so you'll know, is in cognitive behavioral psychology, so I'm very interested in thinking accurately about ourselves and thinking accurately about the world around us. And sometimes we don't think accurately, and we'll talk more about that and how that is part of stress as well. But that notion that I've got to do everything that comes my way, otherwise I'm going to miss out, and I really don't want to do that, I'm going to really regret that. That's what I call the illusion of missed opportunity.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting because I do think survival means something different in the 21st century. Like what that term actually means now is so different than it meant when we were being chased by saber-toothed tigers. It's a whole different thing, but yet it's still survival. And so on that note, when you talk about technology and that sort of thing, do you think we are multitasking more? And do you think multitasking, or at least the illusion of multitasking, which I would love you to explain, do you think that kind of adds to our stress?
Yeah, I think there was this sort of buzz in the media over the last 10 years, 12, 15 years about multitasking, and the idea that multitasking is something that women are better than men at that, and I think they probably are. But I don't think any of us are very effective. Brain science is telling us that in the opportunities that we have to organize our lives, it's much easier on our brains to do one thing at a time and not multitask. So you're trying to cook and you're trying to answer a text and the doorbell's ringing, and you're also formulating what you're going to be doing at work in your head the next day while all of those things are going on. And yeah, you might be able to get those things done, but really our brains aren't wired to efficiently and effectively address all of those things at once. Anybody here a multitasker, even if you're inefficient? Yeah? Yeah. So you know that feeling of, and I don't know, it almost feels like a little bit like so this self-created attention deficit piece that goes on for me. I can notice that when I'm on my laptop, I'll respond to an email, but there'll be something in that email that prompts another thought, and I chase that thought for a little bit, and I try to rein that all back in and do that one thing at a time. Interestingly, research also tells us that when we're needing to get things done through the course of the day, one of the best things to do first is the sort of mundane, boring sorts of things that you need to do. So if that means you've got a list of messages to return, or even as even more boring as some sort of task around the house that you need to get done, something that you do on a routine basis, get that stuff done early, and then you can be done with that. It helps with reduction and allows you to focus more on stress later, or more the tasks later, and reduce the stress.
Right, and this is really sad. It's actually spawned the term single tasking. What is that? I mean, shouldn't that just be like doing a task?
Yeah, well, essentially it's kind of doing what your brain wants you to do and is wired for you to do, and that's individual sort of tasks. I think one thing we've also done in our culture is we've started to believe that everything has equal value. So eating is equal to emptying the trash or answering emails, or all of these things have equal value. And I think because we do have this press, this intensity of stress on our shoulders, that we've forgotten how to prioritize well. And what does that mean? Well, that may mean we've really sort of started abandoning our values. I used my old phone as an example a little bit earlier. I don't know if you've noticed that it used to be that phones were sort of designed and you could sort of design the phone to do what you wanted it to. Now the phones are sort of training us. Does anyone else feel that way? Yeah. It's like the phone is kind of telling you what you're supposed to do now, and now I have to adjust to the phone, whereas before it was far more convenient to do it the other way. But the idea here is that you're right. The single tasking, that one something that we need to do is important, but prioritizing, and don't forget what your values are. Some things we just don't need to do, and we need to be able to do that. I'm guessing we're probably also going to talk about saying no and what that's like as well.
Yeah, let's talk about that now, because I have a real problem with that, which is probably why I'm writing another book with you.
And you're up here right now, right?
Right, exactly. I feel like sometimes I need a no sponsor, somebody to sit over my shoulder and say, no, you need to say no to that. Why is it so hard to say no when you really don't have the time to say yes, you really don't want to say yes, and you find yourself saying yes all the time?
Yeah. Who here has trouble saying no? Good. It's right. I think there are several reasons we do that. Let me ask you, and go ahead and just shout out from where you are. Why is it that you don't say no when you know you ought to? What? People pleasing? Yeah. What else? Feel bad. Yep. Another?
On a positive side, sometimes to do something I wouldn't otherwise do. Like be my full potential in an area that I might be scared to otherwise do.
Gotcha. So you're saying you say yes to sort of expand your horizons.
Yeah, somebody says, will you, I don't know, take parachute, and you go, or piano, it's going to be something less risky.
Yeah.
You go, okay, but I normally would say, no, I don't have the time for that.
So you sort of like the risk. So you'll be willing to do that. Other reasons? Yeah, we don't like dealing with confrontation, do we? We don't. So these are some of the reasons. Guilt, people pleasing, we don't want to disappoint people.
Missed opportunity?
Missed opportunity again. We think, well, gosh, I need to do that because if I don't, something may, happen in such a way that I'll be disappointed, or I'll have missed out, or someone else will be successful and I won't be. Let's just go ahead and talk about that real quick. That's a distortion. We sometimes call that the fortune-telling error, that we think we know what the future is going to be, and we try to guess what that's going to be. The fortune-telling error applies in different ways, but this is one. We predict that something coming to us or coming into us in the future is what it is, but we're no good at that. If you're that good, you should really go out and buy lottery tickets and things like that, because if you can predict the future that well, then you should really invest in other ways. I'm not saying you should go buy lottery tickets today. That's what you learned at the Expo, right?
Right, exactly. Jeff said to buy lottery tickets.
Exactly.
So seriously, tell me how to say no when I don't want to say yes.
Yeah, so I think that you have to understand that people, when they come to you, they usually have really good reasoning for why they're asking you to do something. Have you noticed that? They just didn't sort of randomly do that. You have some sort of skill or ability, or you have a history, you've got a good track record. They want you to do something. There's something that you possess that they want. And they have a really good reason for you doing that. And that's, for those of us who are paying attention to like guilt and people pleasing, we know that we have to watch out for that, because they sometimes will try to appeal to that. They'll appeal to your guilt, like, oh, there's no one better than you. We need you to do this sort of thing. So then immediately that guilt comes in. Sometimes there are a group of people that they just respond really well because there's the appeal to the ego, that you are amazing, and oh, it feels so good to be told you're amazing, so sure, I'll say yes. These people know that. They know that that's a strategy, so beware. So you need to know that it's okay to say no to these people. Now, here's the other piece that I've learned and have written about. It's actually in the Say Goodbye to Stress book, that these people usually have round number 2 of excuses. So when you say no, they have yet another round, they come right back. So it's kind of this real quick volley that happens. They'll ask you to do it, and you say, oh, I can't do that. And then they come back around with another reason. Well, you know, that you've got experience, or such and such is going to really be disappointed. This person's going to be disappointed because they really thought you'd be able to. So expect that as part of that formula. This is going to hone your skill in being able to say no. So then what will happen is that these people now will be a little bit flabbergasted. You might see more emotion coming from them because you're sort of resisting. This is when you want to let them off the hook. You want to say, you know, let me have some time to think about it. And now what you're going to do with that time is to think about it, and you're going to come up with a couple of things. One, you're going to come up with perhaps a written rejection to them. Now that sounds really harsh right now, but I'm saying that just for practically speaking. Practically speaking, you want to write them a nice note and say, it's a great opportunity, but I can't really help with that at this point. And here's the other piece that's a very important piece, and this helps get rid of all that guilt that we're talking about, and that is that in that little note or email or maybe a voicemail that you give them a little bit later, is that you give them direction on how to solve the problem without you. That's going to help you feel like you're still part of the solution, and two, it helps everybody save face a little bit. And kind of like this gentleman up here in the third row, he likes kind of taking on an opportunity, so this actually may allow someone else an opportunity to do what you'd normally be doing. So if that is coming to you as far as a new task or an old task, you can say, you know, let me have some time to think about that, then formulate a written note, because it's also getting that information into that person's brain a different way. Initially they were hearing you, but they may not have been hearing you as well because they're still thinking about what it is that they're going to say to you next. But when it's written out, they actually have to stop and they have to read that. They're most likely not thinking and reading at the same time, and you're going to get a clearer message sent to them. So hopefully that's helpful, and there's no real reason to feel the angst, the guilt that I'm going to disappoint people. Write them a note and give them an alternative. Be part of the solution still. That's part of your expertise that they're asking for, so you can direct them to someone else or give someone else an opportunity to be able to help out.
And they have to say no, right?
And then they may have to say no too. Give someone else practice saying no.
All right, does anybody here have any stress in their job? Any, like, stress at all? Not at all? Yeah, I don't have any stress in my job. 3 deadlines a day, you know, juggling 60 things. So jobs are stressful now. I think people are doing more with less. People are being pushed to the limit more. Are there any strategies you can give to make work less stressful?
Well, I think I have this question asked a lot. How much should I be invested in work, particularly with jobs sort of being on the line these days? People worried about being cut back, people worried about job or promotion growth. What is that like? How much should I be invested? I hear this quite a bit around cell phones and availability. Well, my boss wants me to sort of be on call 24/7, and they give me a phone for that. But then I have to carry that to, you know, my kids' sports games or school, those sorts of things. One of the things you have to do, and be brave about this, is to be able to have a conversation with whoever your boss is and find out kind of what the parameters and expectations are. And once that's established, people are nervous about that because people think that, well, you know, I'm afraid that they're going to think I'm not really a loyal employee if I'm asking about those parameters. And I disagree with that. I think that's a sign of being really a really good communicator with your boss and being able to establish those parameters, because you're also at the same time asking what your boss's parameters are and you're understanding about that. But that communication piece is important. Another stressor that I hear about a lot, and that is the kind of the undercurrent of gossip at work.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah,
yes,
the undercurrent of that can be very, very difficult. I don't know if you experience that. You don't have to raise your hand because she does right here. The gossipy piece at work is something else that I hear a lot about. And we'll talk a little bit also about these difficult coworkers that we have, because that's yet another stressful piece that we face. Many people have difficult personalities that they have to work with. But the initial idea here is that gossip at work is something that you just simply don't want to be a part of. You have to, if you've it's kind of in your heart, if you admit to yourself right now, without raising your hand, that you're a gossiper, you have to look at why that is. What is it perpetuates that behavior? Does it make you feel good? Why does it make you feel good? and need to check that out. Is that something that really is beneficial, or is that something that is kind of pulling you down on the inside? Is there something connected to feeling down about yourself so you have to pull others under the bus with you? Just think about that. I encourage you to do that. For those of us who have to deal with people who like to gossip, we have to also set limits around those behaviors. Don't find yourself in a place where it's just one-on-one with that person, where they're going to be sharing a lot with you. Be certain that if they say something, and boy, this happens. Be sure if they tell you something and you don't agree with it, don't just not respond. Give some clarity to your response, because oftentimes gossipers, if you don't disagree with them, what do they like to do? They like to go and tell that I told such and such about this, and they take your silence as agreement. And you don't want to do that. You want to, if they say something about, our boss is just really, really inconsiderate. And if you just kind of sit there and you don't say anything, they take that as, yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think our boss is inconsiderate. But you might say, well, our boss has lots of levels of stress on her shoulders right now. And that kind of puts a roadblock in there that your silence isn't used against you when you don't even know it. And as a psychologist, this happens a lot in therapy. People like to tell me about things, and I hear about all kinds of things, believe me. And then sometimes I've learned that if I don't point out how it might be detrimental, then they turn around and will quote to their spouse or this or that person, well, that Dr. Brown didn't seem to disagree with me when I told him, and that can backfire. So we always want to put just a small roadblock up there so we're protecting ourselves. And then the last thing is the difficult personalities. I don't know if you know much about like narcissistic personality. I think I want to talk about that one. Is that okay?
Please do.
Please do.
Yeah, I know a few of those.
Liz and I have had conversations about this. I refer to them as the toxic narcissist. The person who, that you, in their opinion, are there to kind of serve them and you exist for them. In the business of psychology, we call that narcissistic supply, that someone wants you to either admire them, adore them, do what they say whenever they want, and that's a very simplistic sort of description of narcissism, but these people that love to be the center of attention, they want us to revere them quite highly. Keep in mind, these folks typically feel very, very insecure on the inside, and they don't want you to know that, but they let it be known in so many different ways by the way they treat others. Those are very difficult folks to deal with too. So again, at work, dealing with narcissists, particularly if your boss tends to be narcissistic, I hear about this a lot in my practice, where a boss is very demanding, an employee's productivity is a complete reflection on the boss and so forth. You want to be able to make sure that your job is well defined, have clear and simple boundaries. Don't try to engage your boss around things that are too familiar about yourself or things that are about your family. Your boss, if it's a narcissistic boss, most likely isn't interested in hearing about those things. And they see that as kind of disloyal, and you don't want to do that. So much that we could talk about with stress related to work and the work environment and people that we have to work with. Again, as we put together Say Goodbye to Stress for Chicken Soup and Harvard Medical School, we divided up the book in different categories: finances, work stress, family stress, the own stress that we have when we get in our own way. Those sorts of things also play out.
Yeah, just one more question about work stress, because I think you say something that I've heard you say before that's very interesting to me. Is that when you go into a job, you should be looking at things that would make you, those are your deal breakers, which can be stressful. So you at least know your line in the sand. So for instance, if you knew your company was cheating their employees or their clients, you don't want to be in a company like that. So could you just explain a little bit more about the blueprint for, or your value document, because I think that's such a great, it's something I carry with me, and I actually do, because I think it was such a great suggestion.
Good. Yeah, I think that there are opportunities that come our way, right, that are connected to work or even other opportunities. Maybe someone is recruiting you for something at your church or temple or something at your child's school, but kind of how it's being approached just doesn't fit within your value system. It's perfectly fine to say no to those things, and knowing what it is that you're going to say no to before you find yourself in that situation. Again, giving yourself time can work to your advantage so much in those situations, so you don't feel like you have the pressure. I talk to adolescents quite a bit in my practice, and we're still dealing with peer pressure these days. But I tell you what, we don't outgrow it, do we? We have peer pressure as adults as well. But knowing those lines in the sand, what it is that you're willing to do and what it is you're not willing to do, you have to be mindful that when you do say no, it's not something that, particularly if it's conflicting with your values, that's not going to be a deal breaker in life satisfaction for you. It may be presented that, gosh, if you don't kind of cooperate with us on this, you're really going to miss out. Well, so be it, because your values, I really believe that values have an internal and an eternal value. And what you do now really defines your legacy later. And whether that's good or bad, and you're going to be defining the legacy of your family, your spouse, your kids. Grandparents are all doing this as well for their grandkids, that whatever you're doing now, it is part of your legacy, and you want that character and integrity to really shine through.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. All right, anybody here stressed about money ever? Like economy, money? Yeah. Keep you awake at night at all, does it? That's a big stressor. In some form or another, whether people talk about the economy, they talk about money directly, about 90% of people stress about money. So what's going on there? I mean, do we all just have no money, or should we be stressed? Or
I think we just don't have money.
Okay. All right, well, now I'm not stressed anymore.
There you go.
So we can
now
move
we know.
on.
Now we know. No, money is one of those stressors. The American Psychological Association had some research recently also that pointed this out. And we know even in marriages, one of the biggest stressors is finances. Communication, I think, will always sort of be the number one problem, but that finances fall right underneath as those things that cause stress. I think there's some really interesting research that came out of Princeton, actually, that talked about kind of joy and happiness and so forth, and that, would you believe that people felt happier the more money they made, up until $75,000. And then after that, they found that it really didn't matter how much beyond $75,000 that you made, that you were still the same amount of sort of happiness and joy, which I think is really interesting. And I think it also speaks to kind of how we think about money, that even if someone has more money, they're probably distributing that in different ways and have very similar stress, because they often will kind of max out what it is that they have to spend. And I thought that was very interesting, that there is a noticeable sort of ceiling for that. When it comes down to it today, you have to know your numbers. I'm, as a cognitive behavioral psychologist, I frequently will give little kind of assignments or experiments for people to run. This is what we do in cognitive behavioral psychology. We want people to try new behaviors, kind of evaluate that and see what it's like on the other side of doing something new. Well, I'm also finding out in my cognitive behavioral work that a lot of people that I give assignments to think about the assignment, but they don't actually put it in play. And I think one of the things that's so important about finances, we think about and theorize about how helpful a budget would be, but I find that most people think about doing a budget, but they don't actually do a budget and actually put pencil to paper and write things down. I think that is essential for managing stress when it comes to finances, is to put your numbers down on paper and know what your numbers are. I think there's also a certain amount, a significant amount, I should say, around how we spend and spending around emotion and emotional spending. I have several of my clients that I see in my practice. You would know that they and I are connected because if you went through their wallet, you would get to their credit card and you would find their credit card wrapped in silver duct tape with the word stop written on the outside of it. Because they're trying to change the behavior of spending with their credit card so much. So what do? We try to put barriers in between the emotion and the convenience of throwing down the plastic. And I don't know if you ever tried to get silver duct tape off of your credit card, but it will make you stop and think. But it is something that we can do to try to manage that emotion. We have so many things that do appeal to emotion. There's brain science actually that's now taking a look at what it is that is appealing to us as we see images in advertising, and people are trying to figure out from an advertising perspective what fires you up, what's going to attract you, what's going to get your attention. So it's very, very interesting when it comes to the financial side of things. What can we do to manage that stress? I think the emotional piece, getting control of that, and again, going back to the budget as well, doing something that's proactive and very concrete.
Okay, and without naming any names, what if your spouse will not participate in the budget, or your partner will not participate in the budget process? What do you do?
Great question. So this is when that communication and financial stress in the marriage comes together, and you're going to see these constant red flags flying when that's going on, and you'll find also that there's some sort of inequity in the spending and the styles of spending. So you have to keep that discussion on the front burner. There's no way around that. You have to talk about finances. You have to be talking about spending. Now, you get into the blame game, and then you have to find out, one person's spending on something and another one thinks that's not a particularly good value to spend on. I hear this a lot when people give to organizations or nonprofits that, well, my spouse reluctantly let me write a check to my favorite organization, but they don't think it's a good organization, that sort of thing. Well, that's where it comes back to the budget, that when you are agreeing on a budget, particularly as a couple, I was mentioning that more as an individual earlier, but as a couple, deciding how you want that money to be spent and kind of have the fairness and sharing of that. You're really fortunate when you do have a spouse that you have similar values to, obviously. Hopefully there was some consideration of that when you guys went to the altar. And really trying to capitalize on that is important as well. So finding those commonalities before you feel like you're starting to get into the blame game financially.
Okay, and actually that's a good segue. Anybody married here? Okay, anybody have a partner who's not married? Anybody have any personal stress at all? Okay, anybody had an event in their life that they have found very stressful? I would have thought the hands would be like people would be standing on the chairs, but right. So personal stress, and I think family, as lovely as that word is, and as much as we love our families, it's a surprising source of stress at times, from communication styles to work schedules to people going through divorce or a death in the family or anything like that. So, am I just misreading that, or are families? I mean, are they relationships kind of stressful?
Absolutely. Family stress can happen. And why is that? Well, we play different roles in our families, don't we? We play different roles. I hear this when people go home for the holidays, that it'll be a young mom or a young dad or an older mom or an older dad. They go back to their parents for the holidays, and all of a sudden now they're back in the kid role, and this is like not the role they've been used to playing at all. Other times that we just always have that cousin or that aunt or uncle who just is always misbehaving at family events. Who has one? Raise your hand and we won't tell. we all have. It's like, gee whiz, they just missed it on sort of like social family etiquette. But dealing with those, again, I come back to the idea of boundaries. Boundaries are so important to set around these folks. Trying to reduce the time that you're exposed in those situations is often good, because sometimes we get into that guilt, that obligation, because sometimes to see one family member that we like, we also have to deal with another family member that is often causing us pain or emotional difficulty, etc. So sometimes there's the trade-off for that, but reducing the exposure time on that is one strategy for dealing with that. I think also changing up traditions, maybe starting some new traditions. I'm not suggesting you start a new tradition and not invite those people that are stressful, but then maybe again there are other ways that you'd prefer to spend time with family, maybe two families together versus one family getting together with 7 other families. As families grow, the organization to family get-togethers also is sometimes compromised. We sometimes also try to keep the old traditions alive that we were used to 20 years ago, but as families change and demands change, and even families with locations, they change, it does cause the complication of getting that tradition to kind of always work out so we can feel good. Tradition is kind of regression, actually, that we go back to a time in life that was more pleasant, was happier, and that's why we get together for holidays, or we celebrate birthdays. Some of us quit celebrating birthdays, right? That's what happens. So anyway, those are some thoughts about that.
Yeah, I'm just laughing because you talk about slipping back into your role. So I grew up in this community, and when I come in, there's a people who've known me here for a long time, and they call me a particular nickname that I would never allow anyone to call me, in my actual life. And somebody asked me today, they said, "Oh, should I not call you that? Does it bother you?" I'm like, but you just slip right back into that role, and it's just so true. And, that actually I find very endearing, but I think slipping back into the role can be actually extraordinarily stressful.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're actually talking about another really useful strategy that again comes from cognitive work. It's called radical acceptance.
Yeah.
That sometimes we just have to work really hard, just accept it for what it is, and move on. That's a hard thing to do sometimes. We have to practice those sorts of ways of thinking. And are you guys curious? I'm curious. So what was your nickname?
All right, so moving on.
Did you see that boundary she just set?
Yeah.
Ooh, that was clear.
I just said no. I'm so proud of myself. All right, let's talk about, I think you have told me this many times in discussions, that stress is really not the situation you're in or the circumstance, it's actually here. So I can tell you personally, and I'm sure everyone here, I'm not even going to bother asking the question, a lot of my stress is I'm doing a really good job of creating it myself. I'd really like to stop that, so please solve that problem for me now.
Yeah, maybe we should do the
right now.
Immediately. Fix me.
Yeah.
Fix me.
Yes.
Yeah, our thinking does have so much to do with how we feel about ourselves and the world around us. I think we've got just enough time. I need 3 volunteers. I'm going to demonstrate some research that actually happened, and we're really good at picking people if we don't have volunteers.
Isn't that stressful?
Not stressful at all, is it?
Yeah.
3 volunteers. You 3 right here on the front row. That was easy. Put that on. So you didn't know when you came today that you would actually get to meet some Olympic athletes, but go ahead and give a round of applause as they come up here to the stage. If you have one handheld, that'd be great. I'll just use that, and that's okay. Perfect. Thank you. So
give those medals back too. They're not yours. You have to give them back at the end.
So if we have the gold medalist stand right here at the top, that'd be you. Yeah. Congratulations. And silver right here, and then the bronze medalist right over here. She's going to have a good story. So there was research that was done about gold, silver, and bronze medalists. And the research was done on Olympic athletes to find out exactly how they think. Now, there was a question that was posed, and I just want you to think about this. The question looked at who was the happiest of all of these athletes. Who was the most happy? Was it the gold? Was it the silver? Or was it the bronze? Now think about that. We're going to actually interview these folks and find out a little bit about what it's like. But isn't it cool to be in like the midst of Olympic athletes? Who would have known today at the Expo that this was going to happen? So you can go ahead. You're supposed to be right at the top there. Yeah, because you were gold. Yeah,
Whoops. Not a coordination sport, huh?
So let's go ahead and interview the gold medalist and find out a little bit about her and what she's thinking and feeling. So congratulations, you won the gold. First of all, tell us your first name and what your sport was this year in the Olympics.
My name is Allison. My sport was softball.
She got a gold medal in softball. How's it feel to have a gold medal in softball?
Excellent.
Excellent. What emotion do you have? Like, what's it feel like emotionally?
Joy.
Feel a lot of joy being up here. Your country's proud of you. Great, great. Well, congratulations. What position in softball do you play?
Pitcher.
Pitcher. That's great. Congratulations. Okay, so now we have the silver medalist over here. Tell us your first name and the sport that you played in this year.
Sure. My name is Cheryl, and I was cycling.
You were a cyclist. Good. How many miles did you cycle to win the silver today?
500.
500 miles.
Wow.
As a cyclist. We see why she is a champion, don't we? So tell us, you have the silver medal hanging here around your neck. What's that feel like?
It feels really good because I know I did my best that I could possibly do. I trained and I did it, and even though I'm not the gold, I'm okay with that. And I'm not I wouldn't say that, but that's me. But I'm really happy.
Very good, very good. So she's really happy as well. Okay. And then do you want to tell us your name and your sport and how things fared for you this year at the Olympics?
My name is Marge, and it was marathon running.
Marathon running. Wow, wow. So how do you feel about with having the bronze?
Pretty good, since I messed my foot up right at the end of it. So to get the bronze was really good.
Okay, and emotionally, it feels like what to have the bronze?
Great.
Great, great. So here's what the research. Raise your hand if you think the silver medalist is the happiest. Now if you think the bronze medalist is the happiest. And now if you think the gold medalist is the happiest. Okay, so of the three, the happiest is still the gold. I mean, the gold is the gold, folks. That person, according to the research, is the happiest. The next happiest was actually, according to the research, the bronze medalist. Now, I don't know, this was not planned, but you got like one of the happiest silver medalists I've ever met on stage like this. She's great, you know, at least I win the gold, but gosh, I'm happy. That is not really typical. You know, I would question her cycling abilities too. I don't think she's telling the truth. 500 miles? I don't believe her when she says she's all that happy. I think she's in denial. But
It's what I do for a living. I'm a teacher, and I encourage, and, you know, I'm a positive, upbeat person.
and an amazing cyclist. So the idea here in the research is that how we think about ourselves affects directly how we feel, our emotions. And the research actually bore out the idea that the silver medalist was filling his or her head with the idea that, man, I was so close to the gold, it's not quite the best. The bronze, on the other hand, was saying, at least I got a medal. So I just want to share that with you, and in response to Liz's question, and thank you guys, wonderfully done. You can just leave your medals there and we'll collect them. Thank you.
Right there.
So the idea is that our thinking does affect how we feel, and having control of our thinking will help us to manage the emotional side of things as well. And that's just a quick example. And thank you guys again for doing that. We're going to actually open up for a quick Q&A, and
Sure.
we'll take it from there, and we'll go from there.
Some questions? I'll come over to you because we're...
Is there a way to manage or prioritize your stress levels, to work on them?
Yeah, I think there are several ways of trying to manage the stress levels. First of all, trying to understand what your stress level is. There was a nice piece of research that was done several years ago that gave us a stress scale, and it goes through and it identifies different events that happen in life, and you can sort of tally that up. We got permission to actually put that in the Say Goodbye to Stress book, so you can go through and get an indication. Things like moving, or loss of a spouse, loss of a friend, job changes. These are all events that can happen in life that actually do affect our stress levels. So getting a good handle on that is so important. But yeah, that's a great place to start with that, and understanding that. I think also sharing life with somebody, even if it's someone outside of your family, is a good way of getting some feedback. I could go to Liz, Liz could come to me, and we could say that here's kind of what's going on in life, and we know that we need to kind of be putting the brakes on things, slowing things down, or just managing life in a different way. Another question?
Some other questions? Do we have... Did you want to ask a question? I noticed that you said when you're feeling overwhelmed, do something like taking a walk. That seems counterintuitive to me. If you're feeling overwhelmed, it's because you have too much to do. So then put that all aside and do the opposite?
Right. So it's so important just in managing stress to manage some of the things that are easy to manage, like your diet and your sleep and the exercise that you get. All three of those things are very clear. Liz and I worked on a different project called The Winner's Brain, 8 strategies great minds use to achieve success. And we talk a lot about what you need to do to optimize your brain and to be able to make your brain function in a successful sort of way. This all applies in stress management, it applies in success, and that is that you want to make sure that you're getting your brain well fed. I always say that your brain is the 3 pounds you never want to lose. We're always going to the gym, we're always trying to to get the right shape or lose weight, but the brain, everything that we do eat goes to our brain, and we need to manage what we're putting into our mouths to manage what is going into our brain. Our brain loves things that are the fatty things that we have in the omega-3s and 6s. You want to eat dark fruits and lots of veggies, green leafy veggies. It loves fish. Just watch the mercury levels, all of those sorts of things. Sleep. You know, we still like 8 hours of sleep. It's a great thing to be getting. Oftentimes we don't see that. I'm waiting for the day that I think it's happening, that we're seeing a lot of people talk more about, well, you have to really eat well if you're going to perform well. I haven't seen us really doing that about sleep, that we're not seeing that as much in our schools yet and on college campuses where sleep is really prioritized. But we know that so much is going on in our brains during that time. There's a lot of consolidation of memory that's going on. Our brain is constantly working. And then, of course, the exercise is also helpful, because it's if you want anything to do to improve your brain at any point in life, and that's exercise. My wife and little boy are here in the middle of the auditorium. Hey, bud, there you go. Give it a shout out to Grant. And we were visiting Grant's great aunt at a nursing care facility not too long ago, just about 2 weeks ago, and she just won the wheelchair race that they have there. So it doesn't matter. You can do exercise, you can be moving, you can do those things regardless of where you are in life, and that's really, really key. So those are some things that you can be doing and taking good care of yourself and taking good care of your brain.
It's recognizing a situation that you're in, recognizing that it is truly stressful. It would be to anybody. Is that actually helpful to the person in how they deal with it?
Absolutely it is. We call that normalizing. That stress is something that we all face, and there are certain responses that we would have to that particular event. Just as an aside, this couple of weeks ago, you're familiar with the Boston Marathon and the events there. I'm the psychologist on the medical team and was in the medical tent when the first explosion happened about 100 yards away, and talking with so many people as a result of that experience since that has happened, even as much as this morning. There are normal things that we go through. We think of a traumatic event like that as stressful. Our bodies can't really tell the difference, what's normal and what's not normal. But certainly knowing that certain events cause stress and our bodies are wired to respond to stress just kind of gives you a sense of relief, doesn't it? To know that I'm going through this is my experience, and this is something that everybody would most likely experience as I'm going through that. We start being more concerned, though, when we have stress that's prolonged and protracted, and we worry about stress over a lengthy period of time. It wears our bodies down. We have difficulty functioning in a way that is productive, and it starts affecting relationships and motivation and our joy in life. But yes, knowing that it feels okay and it's normal certainly would offer reassurance to me and you and most folks.
Any other quick questions? Do you anything you'd like to add?
No, thank you so much for your attention. I know that the book folks in the back have done a great job of getting books in. If you want a copy of books, I'll be out there and be glad to visit with you more. If you have specific questions, folks usually do. So
Great.
Be glad to meet you out there. Thank you.
Dr. Jeffrey Brown and Liz Neprin.